before we get down to gaming, let's dive right in to a new episode of the WoWcast came out today. Special episode, apparently. A new era of Warcraft storytelling for the War Within. Let's begin. It's pretty loud, or is that good? All right.
Welcome to a special edition of WoWcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. The team
Hi,
is
Bethany.
heads down on wrapping up the expansion ahead of launch.
Get out of the way.
But today we are joined by a few incredible guests. Please introduce yourselves.
Sometimes we do bottom left.
Hi, I'm Maria Hamilton. I'm
Then I'm
the
like sitting
Associate
people's
Design
lap.
Director on WoW.
We'll be sitting right in Taran's lap the whole time.
I am one of the Associate Game Directors working on The War Within.
And I'm Taran Gregory, the Cinematic Narrative Director for World of Warcraft.
The
So
legend.
how does the team even approach something as ambitious as the World Soul Saga?
In a word, enthusiastically.
Okay.
You know, we have a really unique opportunity here with the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft that's fast approaching. We really wanted to take a step back and reevaluate how we develop our expansions. In the past, we might have come at it from the perspective of, well, we've done this a couple times. How did we do it in the past? And moving forward philosophically, we really want to take a fresh new approach and take our community's excitement and feedback and really make sure that's at the forefront of all of our development moving forward.
Hey, that's cool.
We wanted to build upon the successes of Dragonflight, right? We felt like we built a really strong foundation there and take a lot of those successes and look to achieve new goals as we move into the World Soul Saga and the War Within.
That's cool. That's an interesting little insight that sticks out to me. Is that a lot of times when you're trying to figure out what to do next or whatever, you're saying, well, how did I do it in the past, right? And however you did it in the past, that can work, and you keep doing that. But there are situations and opportunities that provide a chance for you to do stuff a little bit differently. And I think that that's kind of a cool opportunity and experiment for us as players and gamers and World of Warcraft enjoyers to see how we like the new stuff. And sometimes we'll like it, sometimes we won't. But he also said that he's interested in sort of using the community's excitement and feedback to guide them in that a little bit. So we're, kind of continuing to experience World of Warcraft as the living, breathing game that it is. So if they're going to try to change things up a little bit, that'll be cool. See how it goes. But I like that. That's interesting. That's a kind of something to consider.
Some of those ideas
how we interpret
would be
this stuff
allowing the
forward.
players to have new ways to express themselves and make sure that there's a ton of variety in the content that they're experiencing in World of Warcraft. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're bringing World of Warcraft to as broad an audience as possible. And
Definitely
we're really
have noticed
working
that.
to build new accessibility features and also just new exciting ideas that we also want to bring to the table. Finally, guiding us and crafting this epic adventure is the narrative, right? That's at the forefront of all of our ideas and all of the stories that we're developing along the way. We always like to plan ahead when we're developing World of Warcraft, but this time is a bit different, right? It's multiple expansions all at once that we're really trying to plant the seeds for these future ideas as we move forward in the World Soul Saga. And
pretty ambitious.
At times, I've been in meetings with our creative direction group, and it can be a bit of a challenge to keep all of these ideas in my head all at once. There's a lot of threads that are flying around, but I think the team, is really energized by that opportunity to kind of tell such an epic story. And thankfully, Taran is here, and he's going to talk a bit about all of those awesome ideas as we move forward. And he's kind of the expert of pulling all of those threads and bringing them all together.
So one thing that I love in stories and like shows and books and stuff is when you do have like the whole story kind of like planned out to some extent, what it allows you to do is like leave these little like clues and hints and things that maybe after you've seen the whole story, you watch like the movie again, you're like, oh my gosh, that thing actually was kind of like related to what's coming up ahead. And like I didn't notice it back then, but I notice it now. That all the little foreshadowing and stuff, I actually love that. Let me exit WoW just 1 second so we're not hearing all these guys jumping around casting spells and stuff. But I love that. And so if this kind of thing, 3 expansions ahead, lets them do that kind of foreshadowing and stuff, and you're kind of like always wondering like, oh, is this relevant? Like, what's that mean? That's a really fun thing in these kind of stories. So I'm excited for that too.
I like the conspiracy memes sometimes.
Taran is the goat.
The dots and the
You're right in the
threads.
He is.
What are you most excited for, Taran, with the War Within story?
Well, working on World of Warcraft is always exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love working on this world and with this team. It's been really, really, really exciting getting to work with Chris Metzen again after his return and
crazy.
setting the
He's
vision
back,
for
baby.
the World Soul Saga, this new
back.
chapter of Warcraft that's going to take us through the next few updates.
That was
As
awesome.
Morgan mentioned, right, like during Dragonflight, we feel that that represented a lot of change, a lot of lessons applied, lessons learned. Looking back on Shadowlands, I believe that we took a lot from that story and developed new ways that we were going to present our characters, our villains, our storylines. And Dragonflight was the first step, but I believe that War Within is a great leap forward in our ambitions to create a compelling narrative, bring our characters to the forefront, and really open the first chapter in the next pivotal moment of World of Warcraft that will set the stakes for the story that will unfold throughout the World Soul Saga.
What would you say are some of the narrative aspirations of the saga?
Well, I feel that we've set the bar really high, and we want to meet those expectations and even exceed them. Really trying to create something in the vein of the essence of Warcraft, or the best of Warcraft, bringing that to the forefront. The way
I mean, you can tell from all the discussions and stuff that we have just on stream and stuff, and just hearing about the WoW community, not only are the expectations and the bar set extremely high, they're also pretty variable in terms of what people think World of Warcraft is and or what it should be. And that's probably fair enough. Like, World of Warcraft is actually a lot of different things, and it's appealing to a lot of different people as a result of that. And so that is a pretty lofty challenge to try to meet not only the quality that they're trying to hit, but also kind of like keep everybody happy, which is nearly impossible, as we've seen, but it's a noble effort. And
ways
see
we're
how it
gonna
goes
do
this time
that
around, huh?
is really investing in our world
Yeah, we noticed that.
and story. We always say world and story are some of the most critical parts of the appeal of
That
World
like
of
that
Warcraft.
like the way he was holding the
But
sword
what does
out.
that really
Yeah.
mean? You know, our world
Yep.
is a character.
Lich King
It is
is what you're
fleshed
looking
out
for
through
there.
all
Lich
means
King.
of small stories, big stories. But we want people to be invested in our characters. We want them to go on the adventure with them, to learn more. I believe we have some really compelling stories with some of our most known characters, some of our lesser known characters.
So after playing Elden Ring, I hope that we get to do some kind of like Mikola, like cool, like ancient ore crystal infused like prosthetic arm for that warrior lady. I don't really know much about her. Do we know much about her? I'm just thinking like I want to do what we did with Mikola and like deliver. Was it Mikola? No, Millicent. Sorry, not Mikola. Millicent, and deliver her like some kind of like juiced up prosthetic to like go slash people down. Be
And
cool.
some new characters that we're going to meet along the way.
Something that I love.
she has, like,
about
a
the World
shield
Soul
just
Saga,
attached
and,
to it?
you know,
Oh,
we were
see,
talking about
there-
the
that's
20th
pretty cool.
anniversary earlier. That's a really unique strength of World of Warcraft, right? We have characters
is actually neat.
you've literally grown up with, right? Like at the launch of World of Warcraft, Anduin, I think, was literally in a crib, right?
He was
He was a little boy.
He was a little boy.
He's just a little feller.
Have you seen my father?
Yeah, exactly. And we've watched him grow from
Yeah, it looks
you
like he
know,
had
that
a shield
boy to
as a
the
paladin,
boy
but-
prince to now the king that he is
You got
today.
options.
And this journey is going to continue to take characters like Anduin and continue to see them evolve, and others as well. Like Dagram plays a huge role in the War Within, and that's another character that was just a little baby when we started out, and they're going to be taking a much larger role in this epic saga.
He's
I
the
think
little
another
nerd
lesson we
dwarf.
learned, is cadence and delivery. There were some instances where it
Archaeology
felt
nerd.
maybe like the story was very start and stop, or people had to wait around for a long time for resolutions to long-established storylines.
Yeah.
And so, in trying to address that, we're really looking at the saga as the opportunity to resolve more storylines, bring up new questions, drive the story forward. And one of the things that helps us do that now is the improved content cadence that has been established in Dragonflight. This gives us some really, really handy tools for being able to have smaller updates between larger updates in which we can have the story move forward, we can focus on individual characters, flesh out their stories more, or even just give the sense that the world is always moving forward and that there's something always new to see in World of Warcraft when it comes to our narrative.
So that's cool to hear all this stuff, but what that really brings out to me again is like a glimpse at how much stuff they actually have to focus on when they're like making the game and telling the story. Like they want to make the most compelling, awesome story that they possibly can, but they also need to tell it like at a pace that makes sense, not only for like pacing the story how they want to, but also pacing it for like what players like, what works for players in terms of how hungry they are for the content, but how long they can possibly wait. Also, with the timing of how quickly they can actually like design the next phase of the game that this content is going to come out with, like the storyline and stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and I feel like so often people just don't even give that any consideration at all, and they just like saying, just do this. They should just do what I want them to do. They should just have the content ready and just make it the way that it should be. And it's like, there is actually so much that goes into this, and there's a lot of things that they might want to do, but it all has to be balanced out with all the things that have to happen in order to have like the whole picture of the game work the way that it needs to and be released the way that it needs to. This is very interesting to hear, and it kind of is expanding my perspective at least a little bit, right? But there's lots of things to consider here, right? And then of course, at the end of it all, it's a product that needs to succeed, right? So not only are they trying to pace the game with what would be best for the story, what would be best for the players, but they also got to figure out how to make it profitable. There's a lot of things to consider, right? So when we're looking at all this stuff, you got to keep that in mind, and remember that these are just actual people making the game too. So got to figure it out.
Speaking of characters, Xal'atath is everywhere.
Real human
She's
beings.
amazing. What do you think about our new villain?
Xal'atath is very much an interesting character, and I'm super excited to see the reception that people have had since we announced that she's going to be, very much starring in the beginning of The War Within. When it comes to our villains and the development of our villains, we have learned many lessons. We feel that maybe there's been a couple instances where we didn't quite do the work to earn them out or introduce them to our players in a way that felt organic or compelling. Xal'atath is an opportunity to have this character that, for those who played Shadow Priest and Legion,
Yeah, Jenny knows about Xal'atath.
It was a very compelling character. She's marked very, very highly in terms of like kind of fan favorite, but also lesser known. And that's kind of a magic combination of like, hey, let's take this character and bring them into the spotlight and give them a really compelling arc.
That is kind of cool.
And much like we had done throughout Dragonflight, in the development of the primal incarnates like Iridikron and Viranoth and Farak, we put a lot of effort into bringing them into the story one step at a time, introducing them to the player, giving them compelling motivations, making them a dimensional character, making their desires, and making them real people that we can understand and get along with. And
so I don't really know much about Xal'atath, but I think it actually is pretty cool, because I'm sure I could do some research and I would figure it out. But for me, I'm like, okay, where did this character even come from? And what you can do is actually follow all these like threads and breadcrumbs all the way back to like, Legion, where like, oh yeah, they're actually part of this blade, and the Shadow Priest players have known about them for a long time, because it's like, and a lot of the Shadow Priest players are like, yes, bring on the Void. We've been, the foretelling of this has been going for a while. But for me, I'm like, what the heck? Where did she come from? But she actually has this like long kind of like strange story. It kind of reminds me of like Dark Souls, right? Like Elden Ring. You're like, you get like a snippet of this. Like there's this big character that it like just is on the scene all of a sudden, but like, where did they come from? They actually have all these like kind of like deep interwoven storylines that have like been in the game for a long time now. It's cool.
And Xal'atath is now on her own trajectory to step into the limelight of World of Warcraft, and we're hoping to do all of those same things. And I really feel that Xal'atath is going to be a very interesting character as we watch her story unfold.
I've been quite both surprised and excited by the reception of Xal'atath. I think having kind of those foundations where there's some of the community that's like, oh, you're just getting to know this person.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Yeah,
people have, like Taran mentioned, have been kind of questing with her or experiencing her story in the past.
Yeah, that's cool.
And there's also a lot of really fun stuff and
cool.
opportunities as we are able to plan so far ahead now, where we can plant these seeds knowing, this is the destination. And as we're moving towards that direction, what are things that we can kind of plant? And maybe the players find them, maybe they see it, and maybe they don't. There was some text that showed up in Dalaran where they were talking about like, oh, wait a minute, that's new. What's going on here? And they were kind of piecing together some stuff.
One thing I love that we set forth to do was mid-Dragonflight,
in the spirit of wanting to
seed these stories sooner, to have people along for the ride, to notice the little details. And there was this moment with Iridikron when he was escaping through a portal, and in development we had just slipped this little shadow, elven silhouette in the background.
Oh, there, yeah, I saw.
And a lot of people were like, no one's ever going to notice that. And we're like, that's the idea. The idea is that it's so subtle that when they discover it, it's going to generate all this conversation. And it did.
Yeah, how much fun is that for
all this conversation
about
Xal'atath, and everyone started to get really excited. And so that kind of started building a slow burn on everyone, getting Xal'atath into the conversation. So by the time she was announced at BlizzCon, it actually felt like, oh, yes, we've been expecting this.
That's cool.
Obviously. Right? So it's just fun way ways that we're trying to seed and
Obviously.
plant and prepare the audience for what's ahead.
I think one of the things that makes
Hidden lore and
Zotth really, really
exploration is
interesting
cool.
for players
Yeah.
is there's an awful lot of them that want to be her buddy, who don't see
Jenny
her
always
as a
loves the
villain,
villains.
right? So
funny.
no villain is the villain of their story. They're the hero of their story, and that makes this interesting too because we can play with that a little
Sylvana
bit. We can make sure
sympathizer,
that we're
etc.
leaning into it. You know, is she really the villain?
So the world is just as important as the villains. Maria, what approach have you taken for world building?
I mean, as Taran pointed out, and I think we've talked about in the past, the world really is one of our main characters. And it's really important that when we go into these different zones that we've created, they feel
We get that as a
alive,
mount,
they
by the
feel
way.
appropriate to their
kind of the
cultures
gold
that
one.
live within them.
Look how good this looks.
Unexpectedly, perhaps, we decided to make this a very vertical expansion. So we're starting off on the surface in the Isle of Dorne, which has your classic plains, your beautiful grasslands, and big city, Donegal.
nice.
This is where our
nice.
Earthen live, trying to carry out the edicts of the Titans.
Pretty chill.
And this is where the Coreway is located. So we go down the Coreway, and we get down into the Ringing Deeps. And
I'm not just making this up. It's not just because I played Elden Ring recently that I'm seeing all these like comparisons with Elden Ring, right? Like, I'm not just making this up. You guys are seeing this too, right? This like the gigantic mine shaft that takes you like from like a nice upstairs area to like some of these like deep dark depths of the world. You're like, where did I even just go? Like how big is this zone that I'm in? I'm not making this up, right? There's definitely some like Elden Ring inspiration, right?
the Ringing Deeps is where the machine speakers, the Earthen that are dedicated to tending the machines and the
which I think is a
vast
strength of
works
WoW
the
to sort of
Titans
like
live
keep
and
up
work.
with
and so
current
where we're really
events
starting
in
to
gaming
subvert
and even
expectations is
pop
when you go
culture.
from the Ringing Deeps into Hollowfall. It's a huge area. You can't tell that it's underground. You can't tell that it's a cavern. It's
I mean, we went underground in Dragonflight Season 1, but we didn't do it through like a gigantic mine shaft going deep into the world. It was just kind of flew into a cave, right?
lit by this enormous crystal. And then as you descend, you're going to go down into the last kingdom of the Nerubians, into Aj-Kahet. And this is all about danger and dark elegance. And the whole area is meant to serve as an opportunity to learn about the Nerubians and their big city there, which has been built upon centuries and centuries and centuries of decay. They just build the city on top of itself.
I wouldn't have expected that going vertically down.
Yeah, it's one of the things that
What a crazy
we learned
idea.
from Zaralek Cavern in Dragonflight. We knew we were making an underground space. We knew
just
we
keep
wanted
building
players
it
to be
up,
able to
huh?
transition seamlessly into that space. The idea was to sort of
centuries
give
of
you this
decay.
increasingly wondrous, joyful descent, and make the world really feel alive. Make it feel like it fits with those cultures that are living there. The reactions that we saw from people playing on beta when they first entered Hollowfall, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I love the attention to detail in all the zones. I mean, you just mentioned Hollowfall, but like something that it took me a while to even notice it, but when I did, it like blew my mind was, like you mentioned, there's that huge crystal underground, and it's the sole light source. So if you look around the zone, all of
I didn't explore a lot of stuff on beta like this. Like I logged in and I would like do some PvP testing and stuff, but I was actually pretty light on beta. I think it's really, really good to post as much beta content as you can as a content creator, because people are hungry for that new stuff. But I was actually kind of like preserving my own experience a little bit, so I'm very excited to dive into this stuff for the first time and have like it'd be like an authentic, this is for real like reaction, right? Rather than it being like
trees and the plants
okay,
are
but
actually
we get to do it again
facing
later, right?
that light source. Like if you think about plants out in the
Cool.
world, they kind of follow the sun. Well, what if the sun was static?
We have a desire to help make everything feel right. Everything needs to
They
feel
do a good
like
job
it
of this,
makes
I think.
sense. So for the Arathi, they have these airships, and so all of their tables and chairs and props and things that are scattered around their city, they all have these brackets on them because they would have been mounted on the airships when they traveled. Another good example is
really cool.
the Earthen. So the Earthen are made of stone, and their beds, entertainingly, look almost like a barbecue because they like to be warm. So there's fiery coals underneath them on their beds, and you can see them.
One of the other things
nice
I love
touch.
about the Earthen is they actually have these like memory crystals, because they themselves are almost more of a construct, but this memory crystal has, you know, their experiences, their memories, their, you know, life story in them. And early on in the campaign, we learn about that memory crystal. And Dagran, who's quite
Interesting.
the little tinkerer, finds this fascinating. And there's like a whole quest line where you get to learn about these memory crystals, and you kind of
Have you guys seen Inside Out? I haven't watched the whole movie. That's what this reminds me of, is Inside Out. That's kind of cool. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it has to do with like a girl and growing up and her emotions and stuff, and memories are stored as these little orbs in your mind that you can like access. It's much like this, yeah.
Kind of put them
That's
back
cool.
in the archive and
Kind
you
of
get
a
to
little
learn
small
about this
shout out.
culture as you're kind of experiencing through the lens of these memory crystals.
Very neat.
And then for the Nerubians, we have a really funny local story, a really funny sort of take on
I really like that about
what
WoW.
would happen if you encountered a Nerubian who had a fear like arachnophobia, but they're terrified of bipedal creatures because they don't have enough limbs, and it's just creepy, and it freaks them out. And there's so many more examples. The team really had a great time building out these cultures and these stories.
One of the things
Cool.
Morgan mentioned earlier was making it
Very
easier
cool.
for players to play the way they want to play.
That's awesome.
How was
Forth.
that being reflected in the content we were building?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly learned a lot from Dragonflight. One of the areas that we started to improve on and now have continued is some UI improvements around both the icons on quests in the world, but also the quest journal. We've got some cool filtering that
Good.
will let people find the kinds of quests that they're looking for.
It can be pretty
and the
overwhelming
kinds
as
of
like a new
activities.
player to
We
log
have
in and
some
see like
great
your whole
UI
map just
elements
lit
when
up.
you hover over markers on the map
me know what to do, right?
that let you see what sort of reward there might be and how much time
Cool, Killa.
it's going to be before something starts for events, for example. Additionally, with the
Good job,
introduction of
too.
warbands, we know that players may not want to play the story over and over. They may choose to play it on one of their characters and then play other things. And so we've made sure to provide a lot of local stories. These are stories that tell more about zones themselves, tell about the cultures in those zones, tell about the places, different individual
big
smaller
dude.
characters. We've provided those in a slightly greater number than we had in the past. We are making sure that we're using some of our new features as well to help tell the story. So we have been quite cognizant of the concerns that players who don't do a lot of raiding have raised about wanting to see that final moment. And so we're allowing players to do a story mode version of the raid,
Which I think
to have
is
that
cool.
final fight
I think
without
is
needing
cool.
to go to the trouble of getting a raid group or finding, you know, enough friends to go defeat that boss. Same thing with dungeons. We added follower dungeons that allow people to play by themselves or with friends. And
I've said it before. I think that this follower dungeons thing is actually a like really potentially big piece of content that they could add into. Like, imagine if we're doing all this stuff with Warband, right? Imagine if your follower dungeons were actually populated by your Warband, and you could like gear up your characters and stuff, and so the people that were running with you are like your characters, right? How sick would that be? To like you have your tank or your healer or whatever, you have like all your mains, you're like, okay, I'm gonna make an alt, like a alt DPS, and I can just get carried by all my other characters in this like warband like AI follower dungeon. That'd be so cool. And yeah, the solo raid thing is very cool too. It's like you still want to see the story, and I think they absolutely are gonna have people who are like saying it's like, you know, making the game too easy or whatever, and that like having aspirational content is important. But I feel like people like being able to see the storyline of the game is probably just gonna bring them into the game more, which I think is better overall. I think I've become over time like much more like casual friendly in terms of my attitude. Like when I first started playing the game, I'd be like, oh, they're catering to casuals. All they need to do, they just need to make more PvP content, you know? Like a lot of this stuff that I hear these days, like, oh, they're making WoW for weenies now. Like, I can understand the attitude behind that. It's just not an attitude that I hold. I think over time, I'm like, yeah, the more the merrier for WoW. And if they make it the content that makes people like happy to play the game and lets them get like a more full and complete experience of WoW, that actually is just better overall for the game, because the more people who are playing, the more people who are enjoying playing WoW, the better. And it's even a trickle down or trickle up, however you want to think about it, for the hyper competitive stuff too, right? Because if people feel like they're connected to the game, feel like they're welcome in the game, feel like they can have a full experience of the game, then they're more likely to play more of it. And they might be like, okay, so now that I've seen the raid solo, I'm not scared to go and try to join a group, right? Or if they're able to get gear from solo content, then they're like, okay, so I'm not like so under geared, I'm gonna be holding everybody back, right? I feel like I have a lot of insight on this attitude of gamers because of my wife, Jenny, right? Like she's like a very like solo player, and part of her like reservation on group content is she doesn't want to like hold anybody back. So like I can sympathize with that a little bit. I think it's gonna be really, really cool. But yeah, you like getting like mega end game rewards from like basic content like solo raid, no. But being able to see what happens in the final boss of the raid as a solo player, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Anyway.
Followers that are controlled by the computer.
The followers should be your
Delves is a
warband,
new
though.
feature,
That'd be awesome.
that we're really, really excited about. It's intended to help those outdoor players be able to pop in and do something fun and meaningful, and maybe they only have a short period of time. Now, Delves also have a progression system
Which is
and
cool.
a whole bunch of other stuff associated with it. So we want to
I'm
make sure
excited
that
for this.
everybody
This is
gets a
gonna be
chance to
interesting.
understand and enjoy the story in the way that they like to play, recognizing that everybody doesn't have as much time or opportunity to sit down and, you know, join a big group of people.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I mean,
real
that's
heads
one of the
up.
major goals is not only with
like,
variety of
additions
things
to
that you
the
might be familiar
content
with, like a lot of the cool
that help the
outdoor
game
events
grow
that you might have seen, and we
and
want to make sure
progress
that
and,
you can
you know,
kind of pick and
over
choose the
time,
ones
it's cool.
that you find exciting, and you feel rewarded for those without feeling like you're kind of required to do everything. And then with
That's a good way to
Delves,
do
you
it.
know, that's a new pillar of content that we're building where you wouldn't previously have been able to kind of experience this idea of like progression, but also building upon the story that we've been discussing. There's a big bad in there named Zekvir, who's kind of a lieutenant of Zalatath, and this person's
cool.
in charge of looking for the world soul memories that we're going to be learning more about as we progress through the War Within, and you'll eventually be able to unlock this Zekvir's lair, which
As a
is,
delve?
you know, I kind of equate it to like Onyxia's lair. So there's this big boss at the end of this experience that really feels like it's kind of the cherry on top for this progression, as well as this story that we're telling as you
Cool.
experience Delve.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen this.
What's one
clip
thing you guys
frequently.
are excited for players to experience?
Oh, I think there's just some fantastic local stories out there that are helping sell some of the themes that we're exploring. We also have a fascinating situation where Anduin, who has had some pretty tough times and is doubting himself quite a bit, comes face to face with Farron, who is a great contrast. She's very strong in her faith in herself
Yeah.
and in the light. And the
That's
two
cool.
of them meeting and having this opportunity to talk to each other. I think this is
Like-
also a really
Maybe it's just a paladin thing, but she looks like she could get in and do some serious work in hell in Diablo. Like, I mean, she looks like she's ready to rock. She's about to take on those demonic hordes in Diablo, bro. She'd put the hurt on the forces of hell. Oh my gosh.
key and important moment.
I'm right there with Maria.
might just be
I'm
the
excited
Crusader
for people
vibe,
to
though,
get
but
to
yeah,
meet
holy
these
moly.
new characters. And there's a lot of like really fun story, not only with those individual characters, but
Holy
also
moly.
the cultures that the team has been building. You know, a fun little detail, which isn't a spoiler, is you actually see these like lynxes that the Arathi in the zone are riding around on, and that's like a fun kind of nod to
I know what you're doing, Audios, but let me tell you, there are some men who've been through some shit, and there's some women, or I would say there's some men out there who are going through some shit, so they're a bit vulnerable, and there are some women who have been through some shit, and it makes them strong. That's real life, bro. I mean, you can bring that vibe if that's what you want to do. I'm familiar with it, but that's real, bro, and it's okay that we have stories that involve it,
to
in
how
my
when they
opinion.
set out, they actually went with some
Just-
elves.
just
And
saying.
there's almost like this
It's
blend
all right.
of cultures that are coming
It's
together
okay.
in this zone. And it's really fun to kind of see all those little details as they express themselves in the game.
I think it's always an exciting time as we draw closer to the launch of
That's
an
real.
expansion where all of the content is going to be added to the game.
Surviving trauma makes you strong, not weak. Yeah, you talk about like Anduin. I mean, he's just in it right now is the thing, right? I think trauma can definitely, surviving trauma can make you stronger for sure. I think that's probably what we've seen with the Crusader lady. But Anduin's going through it right now, and you're not always at your strongest when you're actively going through it. You know what I mean? Understand just rage baiting? Oh, I get it too. I get it. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it though, because I think it's worth saying.
Even stuff that was obscured or hidden during testing or PTR. This classically represents the
get it.
cinematics that the team has been working on for a long time and have some really amazing moments. I think the team has done amazing work on this, and I can't wait to see people's reactions to that content. And also,
That was cool.
From
I
all
really liked
directions,
that.
every tool in our toolkit, we release more multimedia projects. I know that just recently we saw the
Yeah,
story
two
of
of
Queen
them.
Ansarek
They're both
in
awesome.
cinematically released, and that's in this vein of trying to build up our villains, give context, give backstory, give dimensionality, and seeing how,
She's got that
things are stirring.
eyes wide
and
open, crazy
all of
smile.
these different projects are coming together to really amplify and excite around the story of the War Within and set the stage.
Thanks,
for
Quant.
the
Hugs. Big flex to both you guys.
Saga.
We'll have to
Thank
catch
you
up
guys
after
so
this.
much for joining me and talking about the World Soul Saga and the world building of the War Within.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, we actually got to catch up a little bit. We had people. So we had, during that, we had Costy Rowe, Tummytons, Dr. Hugs, and Quantum Flex. Thanks, guys, so much. Big flex for all you guys. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's looking good. I like this. I mean, admittedly, like when I'm playing a WoW, I'm not like a big story guy. Usually, like when I'm in the game, I'm like trying to like make gains, do PvP, do whatever I gotta do. But I do like the vibe of this expansion a lot so far. And when we have kind of time in between to kind of like digest the story, it's not as go, go, go. I do enjoy it. Although I will say, I got some kind of feeling that I'm gonna be playing this expansion maybe a little bit differently than I played Dragonflight, where in Dragonflight, like I only played Warrior, and we got rank 1 season 1, and whatever, right? We're doing our thing. This one, I might play some alts. I might chill. I might be like a small return to kind of the way I've played WoW in the past, where I'm just kind of goofing around. Like we have solo queue BGs now, so I can just goof around in BGs all day if I want to. We can play alts, and alts are like a perfect place to you know, or I should say solo RBG is like a perfect place to just goof around on alts and stuff. It could be really fun. It could be really fun. We probably will still be playing some arena, of course. We'll probably still be pushing Glad and maybe even rank 1 in season 1. We will see. But I mean, like the warbands thing, it definitely has me kind of thinking about playing some alts, and the solo RBGs are definitely a place to do that. So I don't know. I might be casual Bajheera gamer in War Within. We'll see. We'll see. I could say this and I could feel how I feel during pre-patch, and then of course, you know, War Within actually hits and I'm just only playing Warrior forever. That's you know, equally likely. But this expansion has a really nice vibe to it. I feel like it's like a very like friendly, warm, welcoming, welcome back kind of vibe. And not everybody's gonna like that. Some people, you know, that we've at least heard recently with videos that we've been reacting to is like everybody just wants like blood and guts, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, which I don't really think it's ever really been that for me personally. I think WoW has always kind of been like a fantasy game with some really badass stuff happening. Definitely some cool battles. Really enjoyed it, but this has got a very friendly, warm, welcoming vibe, and it looks like they're kind of continuing on this sort of Blizzard style of making the game as accessible as it can be to as many people as possible, which I definitely think lends to its long-term health and success that it has enjoyed up till now, and it kind of helps secure that long-term health and success for the future. So this will be good. What a World PvP look like? I mean, at Dragonflight World PvP, we had the weekly quests, and we had all the World PvP quests that I think was like a good place for that World PvP to pop off with War Mode. So I think good. Could be good. Should be fun. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That was a lot of fun. Good job, team. War Within's looking great.